you have to be really clear on where you're at and accepting kind of full responsibility in terms of deciding that you're actually going to make the change and not just entertain the idea that this would be nice for me to do. And there's a huge difference between the two. And once people recognize the fact that maybe in the past they just wanted this to be kind of a dream or this is wishful thinking versus, you know what, I'm going all in now. I'm finally at the point in which I've had enough of this and I'm going to commit to actually changing my life, changing the way that I look and feel about myself.
That is Galen Lundin this week on Coach's Corner. Hey everybody, how's it going? This week and this month, I am launching something for the first time called Coach's Corner. And my goal with Coach's Corner is to bring you, the listeners, some value on topics that I think will apply to this podcast and the listener of this podcast. So my guest or my coach for the first edition of Coach's Corner here is Galen Lundin. And I have been actually friends and following Galen on Facebook for a little while now. And I've really been interested in kind of what he's up to, some of the things that he posts on Facebook, and, you know, some of the ways that he's trying to help people, because he is specifically focused on helping people not only lose weight, but keep the weight off. And so I've been very intrigued by, some of the posts that he's put up on Facebook and some of the ways that he's trying to help people. And so when I initially started this idea of Coach's Corner, I had put out a post on Facebook, and he was one of the ones that actually responded and said, yeah, I would love to come on and help out. So I reached out to Galen, we got connected, and our focus for today's episode is all on losing weight, how to start, like what are the things that you should be doing within that first kind of days to weeks and months to jumpstart your weight loss journey. So that is everything that we cover in today's episode. If you have any questions or you want to kind of explore anything further, you can always send me a message, Facebook, Instagram, email, and I'm sure that you could do the same for Galen. His name is Galen Lundin, and that's how you can find him on Facebook. So without further ado, I bring you this first edition of Coach's Corner. I mean, I'm very thankful that you reached out and, expressed interest in coming on just for one Coach's Corner. So, it's completely up to you and your time and everything.
Sure. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I enjoy doing these interviews too because it helps me speak about what I'm trying to as a message as well. So this is the process of refining and defining that consistently because that's always evolving to a certain extent. So the more I get to talk about it, it helps me as well. So
yeah, and so your primary focus is helping people with their weight loss, and you really like to focus on helping people with their weight loss, whether it be their first time that they're starting, or sometimes that classic second and third time starting where they have done it before and they have lost weight and then ended up putting the weight back on, and then they're kind of getting back on the wagon, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for many people, it seems as if they're been dieting their entire life almost. It seems like they're battling the same 10, 15 pounds, and they're always on a diet. They're always trying to lose weight, but they never really create that momentum or that shift in which they can actually lose the weight and keep it off. And that's ultimately where people want to be. They want to get to that point in which they no longer have to worry about being on a diet or fearing food or fearing calories. They just want to look great in the clothes they want to wear and have that burden lifted off of them that they have to continue to push and struggle through trying to lose all this weight.
And so the first and kind of primary thing that I want to focus on here is, what, in your opinion, do you think is that most important first step, whether you have to lose, 10 to 15 pounds or you have to lose, 150 pounds. And if there is a large difference, if it's a different first step for those two situations, what is the difference?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. There's the first step in terms of actually deciding to make that commitment. And I see two different sides of this. There's the idea of liking to want to be that committed person, and there's actually the person actually jumps in and says, you know what, I'm done. I'm sick of this. I can't continue doing this anymore. I need to make a change. And the other person is, it'd be great if I lost 10 to 15 pounds. I'm going to kind of work out this week. I'm kind of eating, a little healthy this week, but I'm going to continue to have my old habits, my old routines. And so they're just kind of in that pre-contemplation phase, kind of in and then kind of out. So you have to be really clear on where you're at and accepting kind of full responsibility in terms of deciding that you're actually going to make the change and not just entertain the idea that this would be nice for me to do. And there's a huge difference between the two. And once people recognize the fact that maybe in the past they just wanted this to be kind of a dream or this is wishful thinking versus, you know what, I'm going all in now. I'm finally at the point in which I've had enough of this and I'm going to commit to actually changing my life, changing the way that I look and feel about myself.
And so you think it's that commitment. It's making that hard decision that, okay, I'm ready to do this, regardless of what it is, quote unquote. It's making the commitment that you are going to change.
Absolutely. And I think when you mentioned earlier between losing 10 and 15 pounds or losing 100 plus pounds, there can be a big sense of overwhelm and kind of anxiety around approaching this. Like, oh my God, I've got all this weight to lose. How am I going to do this? What are my friends going to think? What is my life going to look like? And so a lot of anxiety is created around this. And so initially there's a big fear of uncertainty and a lack of belief in, in themselves, or a lack of belief in the coach, or a lack of belief in the system or program that they're using. And so what I always recommend clients doing is to start as small as you possibly can by making very small changes that are not very threatening. It's not a matter necessarily of having a whole 180-degree switch of your life and changing everything at once. Oftentimes it's just picking something that you can change that ends up having a tremendous difference in the end. So most of my clients struggle with some form of stress or anxiety in their life, and much of their eating challenges kind of revolve around that. So one of the first things that we do is we actually just address their home environment and their work environment. So that could include, cleaning out your pantry, but at the same time, putting away your folded clothes that you've been, going back and forth between being on the bed and being on the floor, making your home environment a space where there's a lack of clutter, where there's just some organization and some peace. So when you step into your home after a long day of work, it's not a more stressful environment for you. And same thing when you're at work. If you've got papers all over your desk and everything's a mess, and you could say it's organized chaos because that's typically the description that's used. But if your workspace creates anxiety and stress for you, you're going to resort to food or alcohol in order to kind of escape that or just numb that. But when you transition through your home space and your workspace and you're actually in a state in which you feel good about being in that, you notice a lot of your triggers for food and escapism and alcohol in order to kind of remove yourself from that become a lot less. And when you start doing that, then all of a sudden you realize you don't need food to feel better. You can start making better decisions for yourself.
That's a really interesting point there, and I had never considered that myself, but I like that a lot. That when because if people come home, they're already stressed from work, and then like you said, they're stressed about the laundry that they haven't put away for the last 4 days. Then that's just more stressors. And I know for me personally, it doesn't matter what the stressor is. If you're someone who uses stress as an excuse to then eat, you'll use anything. You'll stub your toe and you're like, oh, see, I'm having the worst day ever, and you'll go eat. For me, it's always I've said this a million times, but for me, it's soft pretzels. So I'd stub my toe and then go get 4 soft pretzels. Oh, see, I'm having the worst day. So you'll use any excuse that you possibly can. So yeah, having that extremely stressful environment, I could see how that could potentially pose a problem. Now, I do have a question about the small changes. Because I've heard both things. Like I've heard make small changes that you can kind of deal with, that are going to help you, and I've also heard to make small changes, but also make them challenging. So don't make it something simple like, oh, I'm going to take this multivitamin every single morning, and like that's your small change that you make for a month. Now, don't get me wrong, taking a multivitamin could be really good, but that's not very challenging either. And so I want to hear your thoughts on that, and then I wanted to provide an example of like my first a change that I made that was a challenge.
Okay. So what I use is like the Goldilocks approach. If you remember the story of Goldilocks, I'm just going to use one small example here. She wanted some porridge. The first cup was way too hot. The second cup was too cold. And the third one was just right. And so when you think about this in terms of making these changes, if you try to do too much too soon, you become overwhelmed and you're going to enter this freeze mode in which you don't do anything, you completely shut down. If you do too little, you're not going to see the positive feedback. You're not going to see the results that you want out of the effort that you're putting in. So that's not very motivating either. And so you have to find that just right amount that you feel confident in and competent in, that allows you to say, I can actually do this. I can actually feel as if I can finally lose the weight this time. And you also have the progress of seeing that positive feedback loop at the same time. So what is small changes for one person may be a drastic change for somebody else. And that's why it's so important that when you work with someone, you have understanding of what these small changes can be that you may not even be aware of, that can have a huge influence on your results in the end. So it's not too much, not too little, but just right.
So I'll give you my example, and then I would love to hear a few examples that you've used with some of your clients as well. My first one was I'm not a huge soda drinker. Like I'll have a soda every once in a while, but my vice for the longest time was flavored coffee creamers. So the Cinnabon flavored coffee creamers, all the fancy ones that come out around Christmas, the mint, this, that. And I would use them in my coffee. And I'm not sure if people are aware or not, but a serving of those creamers is 2 tablespoons, which if you actually go and measure that out, that's not a lot of coffee creamer, especially if you think about like how much creamer Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or these other people put in there. So my first step that I did was I completely went cold turkey and cut out the coffee creamer, because there was a lot of empty calories and a lot of processed sugars in some of those flavored coffee creamers. And believe me, it was not the easiest thing to do at first, because black coffee is bitter. There's really not much flavor to it, but it was just one of those things where I knew that it was going to kind of help me in the end, so to speak. And now I can't drink my coffee any other way than just regular black coffee. And it doesn't matter whether it's, a cappuccino, latte, whatever. I just can't do those too much anymore, and I prefer to just have my coffee black, and that really helped cut out some of the excess fat, the excess sugars, and all that stuff. So that's my example of a seemingly small change that kind of assisted in that jump to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things in which if you have someone who drinks coffee 7 days a week and they put in a lot more than that typically, right? And all of a sudden you start cutting that out. Over time, that's going to have a pretty big impact. And it may seem like a small change, but if you kind of extend this the course of 3 to 6 months, 9 months, a year, that could be 5 pounds potentially. And so we can't necessarily discount the small changes. Just because they're small doesn't mean they're not going to have a big result in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, are there any things that you can think of off the top of your head that you've kind of used with some of your clients that have helped jumpstart them?
Yeah, I think the biggest question I get asked around kind of weight loss is, what is a healthy snack? And my typical response is none of them. because oftentimes we don't need to eat snacks. We eat because we try to procrastinate. We eat because we're bored. We eat because we're stressed and we're anxious. And so if you eliminate snacking from your diet, and there's times in which it can be useful, but for the most part, if you're eating 3 to 4 meals per day and you eliminate snacking, you could potentially taking out 500 to 600 calories a day just by not picking between meals. And so if you stop that, that could be a huge game changer in the end.
That's a really good one. Yeah, I like that a lot because people always have that snack drawer at work, or they have the snacks that are out and provided. Sometimes, if you're, I guess I don't know if you would call that lucky from your company, but if you have snacks that are provided by work, just little things that you can go and grab. People tend, I could see how people can definitely overeat in that area. And I think a lot of the other thing with that is that, people think, oh, healthy snacks. Yeah, like nuts. Nuts are a really good healthy snack. But again, what people don't realize is, a handful of nuts is probably closer to 2 or 3 servings of nuts versus, like a serving of almonds is really not, it's not a lot. So people can definitely overeat in the snack department.
Yeah, I think a serving is like 14 almonds, but now they have like those blue diamond, like jalapeno roasted almonds. And if I buy that, I'm gonna eat the entire thing. There's no way I'm gonna count out 14 almonds. So at that point, it's like you have to understand what foods you can and can't have around that. If a serving size is just enough, like peanut butter, notoriously overserved peanut butter, right? And so that's one of those things that I know if I have around the house, I'm probably going to overeat it. So it's best that I don't have it in my environment. And that way, the decision to eat it or not, have a little bit more, a little bit less, really isn't there because it's not within reach.
So now, do you think, I'm sure you, especially being in the fitness world, you've seen those memes, abs are made in the kitchen and sculpted in the gym. Diet is, 90%. The gym is 10%. Do you feel that those are accurate? And do you think that for people who are just starting off, where should they place their focus? I know we've kind of discussed some of the dietary changes, just so far. Should it be a balance of 50-50 or should it be, more like a 60-40, a 70-30, diet versus gym?
Yeah, I think there's another component too, and the results that we get are a reflection of the life that we choose to live. And oftentimes there's a focus on diet and exercise, but I think there's a much bigger picture when it comes to addressing the individual in and of themselves, their values, their beliefs, their ambitions, their purpose, their relationships, their mindset. There is a huge holistic approach when it comes to making this long-term change and not, just trying to lose 10 pounds for a Cancun beach vacation. That if you really want to change your life, you have to take a look at the bigger picture. And so where the mind goes, the body will follow, and where the body goes, the mind will follow. So there's a very important aspect in terms of exercise and creating that I exercise today, so I should probably eat good. And when I don't exercise, it's a lot easier to eat bad. And I'm not trying to use this good or bad morality around food, but there's a very strong connection behind taking care of yourself and taking care of your commitments, and then you following up with better decisions throughout the day. So you just have to find that right approach in terms of, again, if you're not exercising right now, trying to go to the gym 7 days a week is probably going to be a huge jump and a drastic change. In my experience, when people try to do that, they're going to get burnt out because life gets in the way. There's other parties that are going to take over. And then they get defeated and say, well, I can't do this. And they give up and they're back to square one. So again, it goes back to not too fast, not too slow, and just right. But the aspect of the physicality in the gym, and it doesn't even have to be in the gym. It could just be hiking and working out outside and doing those things is a huge influence on everything else that's going to happen in your life. And so they're very interrelated and interconnected.
Okay. And so, we have some small changes that people could make. And I think just like you were just saying there, if small changes don't necessarily have to be just structured around the diet. Small changes could be in the activity levels as well. and I'm sure some of the listeners of my podcast are probably sick of hearing this story, but when I first started, I was working with a very good friend of mine who is an athletic trainer, and he told me from the very, very start that I was not permitted to run. And it was due to my size. He didn't want me to put that stress and that strain on my joints, my knees, my ankles, and all that stuff. So I was not permitted to run right from the start. But is there anything that could be recommended to get people started in the gym, or maybe even just at their home, to get the snowball and effect rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say walking, because it's going to do two things. First of all, you're making the commitment to move, which is a really important mindset shift. At the same time, just walking greatly reduces stress and anxiety. So just the act of rhythmic locomotion, so just one foot in front of the other for 10 to 15 minutes, is going to have a huge influence on how your brain's going to operate. You're going to get some endorphins, not quite the same as heavier, intense exercise. But anytime you have a chance to get out of your chair and actually move and go outside, get some sun, get some fresh air, it's going to make a big difference on the way that you feel. And the better that you feel, chances are you make better decisions that are going to serve you and the person that you want to become. So even walking in of itself is a great way to go about doing it. About 3 years ago, I did a bodybuilding competition in which I lost 40 pounds over 4 months. And my only form of cardio was walking for half an hour, 3 times a week. That was on top of strength training. But it doesn't have to be this high intensity interval training or for long distance. I was just standing on a treadmill and just walking for half an hour. And that was enough to keep progressively losing 2 pounds a week.
And so now, I guess this is the great debate between, cardio and weights. So I think it's a tough one. For one, people who have a lot of weight to lose and or they are not used to going to the gym, they get embarrassed, and they're not keen on going to the gym. So going to the gym and saying, okay, hey, here's what we're going to do. You're just going to go to the gym. You're going to toss some weights around. People who haven't gone to the gym are not, they're not going to just go and start lifting weights, especially if they don't really know what to do. Some people argue that the weightlifting and the resistance training is better for weight loss, and others argue that the cardio is better for weight loss. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think there's kind of two questions to that. There's the first one is the fear of judgment, of being someone who's overweight and stepping foot in a gym, and what are people thinking of me? What am I going to do? Am I doing this right? And the second part is cardio better than strength training, or strength training better than cardio? And instead of saying a better, I'm going to say what's a more skillful decision. And so going back to that, I think that in the long run, focusing on strength training has a greater impact on the way that you look and make you feel stronger. But at the same time, if all you want to do and that what feels right for you is to start walking on the treadmill, then I think that is the best starting point. So again, it has to be very customized, individualized to where the individual person is at, what they feel comfortable with, and what they feel confident and competent in what they can do. So oftentimes, yes, I'm going to start with the treadmill, but one day I'm going to start lifting some weights and see what happens. Okay, actually, I start to like this, and next time I'm going to do this again. And before you know it, you start making a transition from just being a cardio-focused person to actually integrating more strength training into your life. And I think we need a combination of both those things. But personally, if I were to make one recommendation, it would be focus on strength training over cardio.
So you're in the strength training camp over cardio for people who are just getting started then.
Yeah, I think there's a certain mental benefit, a cognitive benefit you get out of feeling stronger and lifting weights, and it's to have a more dramatic change in like shaping your body in terms of actually adding lean muscle mass. Because most people, in fact, all people can benefit from having more muscle mass on their body, especially if you're in your 40s and your 50s. it's extremely important that you preserve as much of that as possible so you can continue to do the things that you love to do. And cardio in and of itself doesn't necessarily address that or assist in injury prevention. So I think the longevity aspect of strength training and shaping the way that you want to look is a really important part.
Now, mind you, this would only be if you have to pick one or the other, correct? Normally, what you would suggest is kind of using the two together and getting the benefits of both of them.
Right. But if I had to pick, strength training.
Okay. Understood. Now, my follow-up question about the strength training is that I'm sure you have seen, and this is kind of, I'm going based off of people who aren't going to have access to a personal trainer and or a coach. I was very lucky that I had someone who I had access to who has an immense amount of knowledge about not only the body, but kind of getting people started and what would help. But for people who do not have that, is it beneficial to start on kind of like the guided machines in your gym that are going to help build up some of those muscles and almost teach you good form prior to then shifting over to the free weights, and also help in building some of that confidence?
Yeah, I think that can definitely be an aspect of it. I mean, nowadays with technology, there's YouTube, and so you can always look at, hopefully you're looking at a good, reputable, credible source. But there's a lot of ways you can actually look at proper exercise technique online as well for that resource. And there's tons of information all over Google. But you can also look at some templates in terms of these free workouts that are pretty general, but can actually benefit most people who are just starting off. And so if you can't afford to hire someone to give you the guidance, direction, and support, the internet is also a great resource to have a lot of information.
I will say that when I wanted to really follow a program as opposed to kind of just going and doing my own thing, I went to bodybuilding.com, and I found they have a plethora of plans that you can use for muscle building or for weight loss. And you can actually, it just loads the schedule right in for you could put it into your calendar, what days are going to go where. And each one has, a certified personal trainer who's going through the entire program. And the one that I used in particular with Chris Gethin, it would actually show him going to the gym and doing the exercises. So you could see him doing the exercises. You could see he would take you through the entire thing. And I thought that was really, really helpful. And I think that bodybuilding.com, they have, not only do they have these plans, but they have an entire exercise database where you can go through and check some of these things out and, see people doing these exercises. I think that's really, really beneficial for people who don't have access to a personal trainer and or a coach.
Yeah, that's actually one of the first things I thought of when I first started working out. Bodybuilding.com was one of my biggest resources. And that was before online training got really popular. And yeah, I haven't visited in quite a while, but I'm pretty up to what's a better word for this? I'm up to speed in terms of Chris Gethin and his program and all these different types of online programs that are coming out. So yeah, that's a great resource to use. That's relatively inexpensive, especially if you want to take the next level and just hire someone online who's just going to give you the basic rundown of what to do. Plenty of free information online and get you started in the right direction.
Well, and see, when I did it, the first plan that I followed from Chris, it was actually free. Like, I didn't have to pay for it at all. So if you do have to pay for it now, I'm sure it's probably a minimal fee, but I may be pretty far out of date on some of these things because as far as I knew, it was all a free program.
Yeah, it probably could still be. I haven't checked that, to be honest, in a while, but yeah. Free information is great, but I also find that if you pay for it, you're much more committed and much more likely to get the results as well. So, yeah, there's a trade-off either way.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, I couldn't agree with you more there. I I started a Facebook group, and there's some people in the Facebook group right now. And I said, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. Each week we're going to cover a topic, and we're going to go through this for 8 weeks. And I can almost guarantee that if you follow the things through this 8-week program, you will lose the weight that you want to lose. And there is absolutely no charge. And guess what? I don't even know how many of them are actually doing it, because there's no charge. There's nothing keeping them accountable to it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the rub, right? I mean, if you don't have any skin in the game, you could have all the solutions you could ever need, but there's no exchange, especially monetarily, doesn't necessarily mean you're actually going to do anything about it.
Right. And I did it almost as a social experiment, just to see, like, hey, here's all the information that you could possibly need. You've said that you want to lose weight. You've said that you want to do this. You've said that you want to make the changes. If you don't have access to a coach, that's fine. Guess what? I will help you. I'm here. Here's this group. You have access to the coach now. And here's all, we're going to go through. We're going to cover a topic every single week. And let's do this. And yep, sure enough, without anything holding them accountable, and just a coach isn't going to hold you accountable sometimes. There has to be some sort of exchange that you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm paying for this and I'm not using it.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Because especially as being an entrepreneur and starting a business, I can't tell you how many PDFs and free programs and free guides that I've downloaded and never used. So if it doesn't cost me a couple $1,000s, chances are I'm not going to utilize it at all.
Right. And I think it's amazing that at the beginning of the year, that's where gyms make their money, but people sign up for these gym memberships, and there is an exchange of money there sometimes, and still people don't use it. So I think that's a tough one as far as the accountability goes, and I think that then goes back to the very first point that you made, and that is you have to be ready to make the change.
Right. When it comes to accountability, that's a funny thing too, because when I think of accountability, it's like I need someone to pull me along to make me do something I don't really want to do. And when you think about it, it's like once that tether is cut, then what's going to happen? So you really have to take personal responsibility and align yourself with your vision, because as a coach, I don't hold people accountable. I simply won't do it, because if I have to make you do something, as soon as I'm gone, you're going to go back to doing all those things that you were doing in the past. And so accountability isn't part of my game. I've actually helped you understand what's stopping you from holding yourself accountable. Because think about it. Your boss doesn't have to call you every day to get out of bed and go to work. You do it because the stakes are high enough. And if you start taking personal responsibility for your health and your life at that same level, you don't need a coach to hold you accountable. You just need support, guidance, and direction to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's a great comparison too. Like getting up and going to work, you do it, because you just one of those things. And it's funny because some people don't like doing that either, but you do it. So I think that, accountability and people reverting back to their ways. It's kind of like the little kid who follows the directions, when mom's standing right there, but as soon as mom turns her back, he's like punching his brother in the head or something.
A less violent example, but yeah, pretty much like that. Sure.
So now, we have a solid base for what people can do in the gym. If they feel like they can't, like they're not ready to go to the gym yet, there's definitely some things that they could do at home. Is there anything that people could set up to kind of do some of this resistance training at home, maybe even low budget, that could help them, start to lose the weight and build up a little bit of confidence before they go and jump into this gym membership, whether it be weightlifting, free weights, or you just getting started on some of the machines?
Yeah, I mean, you can get, a pair of dumbbells, or 3 or 4, 5, 10, 15, 20-pound dumbbells, depending on where you're at. There's bands, which are a great resource. And there's always like P90X and Insanity that had a huge hit in terms of in-home workouts and following that type of program. Now, you have to be relatively in shape, and you have to be making sure that what you're doing is the right fitness level for you. But you can do most of those things at home with minimal equipment, minimal financial investment.
And so, on that same note, P90X, you see the commercials for those, and you see all kinds of stuff for, either these at home workouts or things that you could do at the gym, Peloton, all this stuff. And there's always going to be that person that says, well, I hate riding a bike, or I hate going running, or I hate doing this. So that's why I haven't been able to lose weight, because I basically hate exercising. What do you say to that person? What do you offer that person as an option?
What do you like to do? And can we do more of that?
Yeah, and that's fun. I mean, I kind of had a feeling that that's what you were going to say, but I want you to kind of fill me in on what you think of, like some of these kind of alternative methods for quote unquote exercise.
Yeah, so besides walking, I mean, I live in Chicago, and so there's a concrete jungle. There's not like a lot of hiking trails. You can't just hop out. And I guess there's a river, you can go kayaking, but in a few months it's gonna be freezing outside. So outdoor activity is kind of limited. But when I think of like the response, I hate exercising, I hate working out. I think we have to kind of dive in a little bit deeper to figure out what's actually going on there. Why do you hate this so much? What previous experiences have you had that may be kind of influencing your beliefs and your relationship with moving your body in this type of way? And I think oftentimes we can actually get down the root cause of that, switch that belief system, and allow you to actually start enjoying it. So it's not often necessarily the task in and of itself that's less enjoyable. It's a relationship to what we're doing that can be unenjoyable.
And I think that, and you can obviously please share your input on this one, but there's so many options out there for different activities that you can do now, especially with like Zumba and body pump and CrossFit, and there's bar classes and yoga and hot yoga. Like there's just so many different options. Like if you go and you try something, you don't like it, there's going to be 30 other things you could do. Like there's men's basketball leagues, there's women's field hockey. Like there's just so many things that people can do to stay active, that I think we get stuck in this cycle of, oh, I have to run to lose weight, or I have to take this spin class and I have to be just absolutely dripping in sweat and, suffering for an hour straight if I want to have that, body that I've always dreamed of. And I don't necessarily think that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're involved in some type of competition in which towards the end and you're getting through that peak level of training, which is probably not going to be the most enjoyable, it's really important that you do what you enjoy, because when you enjoy it, you're going to repeat doing it. And so it's really hard to make yourself do something you hate. So if you're trying to follow a diet that you hate, it's not going to work. If you're trying to follow an exercise program that you hate, it's not going to work, at least not in terms of the long run. So that's why it's so important to figure out, what do I enjoy doing? What do I feel good about doing? Does this actually feel like a lifestyle or sustainable approach that I can continue to do? So instead of just making these brutal workouts this is something funny. So when I had a consultation about 2 weeks ago, one of the first things that she said to me is, I don't want a personal trainer screaming at me. I was like, what? Where do you get that idea from? And so she's watching The Biggest Loser, and she thinks that the idea of a personal trainer is to have somebody yell at you and berate you, because that's what she saw on TV. And so there's so many misconceptions that we have about what personal training and what about coaching is all about, that it's really all designed with the client in mind. How can we get you to the next step and the next step after that? And it's not all about making you do workouts and burpees and making you drip until your eyes bleed. It's about how can we help you slowly get better so you can be the person that you want to be.
And I didn't want to poke that bear necessarily, but you kind of already poked it, so I'll poke it too. Especially for people who are first starting, can you please talk about how realistic or unrealistic shows like The Biggest Loser and Extreme Weight Loss and all these other things are?
So, all right. Part of the thing is that they are in a controlled environment, meaning that everything is accounted for. They're in a situation in which the real world really isn't interfering with anything that's happening. So we're in a closed system, a closed loop in which everything is influenced to get maximum results while they're there. Unfortunately, the real world does not operate like that. You've got a whole bunch of other stuff that's happening, a whole bunch of other influences that are going to have these subtle changes on the decisions that you decide to make. They're going to affect your sleep. You're worried about money, bills, income. There's everything else that's happening. And so when you're in that boot camp retreat type of setting, it's easy to get results. But what happens once you leave, right? And that's kind of like the same approach that most people take to trying to lose weight. They're following this program for a month, and all of a sudden something happens and they fall off and go back to what they were doing before. So without going on a rabbit hole too much about Biggest Loser and the unsustainability and everything that happens there, I think that when you really try to push yourself and you don't have the proper foundations in place to actually lose the weight and keep it off, it's going to be the same battle that many people have. It's losing the same weight over and over again. Because if you don't adjust your behavior, if you don't adjust your habits, and you don't adjust your environment, the results won't stick.
And I think I would love to do a follow-up show, not to be like a dick, but just to say like, okay, hey, you were on The Biggest Loser. Have you kept that weight off that you lost? Like, regardless of whether, and I've only sat down and watched it like a handful of times. But I'm pretty sure I think people get like voted off. There's like teams, it's like a competition. So like even those people who after like 3 or 4 weeks who definitely lost some weight on the show, like, hey, did you continue on or did you revert back to your old ways? And I think that this also goes to that same point of accountability. Like, did you really want to do it or did you do it as part of like this TV show, like I want to win thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's deeper aspects of obesity and childhood trauma and genetics and hunger response and ghrelin and leptin. And so there's a whole other side of that. But if we just try to apply this to everyday people who aren't suffering from that level of obesity, who just want to lose, up to 30, 40 pounds, it really addressing the foundation in your life and making these behavioral changes is what's really important, not following the super strict system that you can't stand. You can't wait till it's finally over. And that's the thing. If you can't lose weight and feel great doing diets and workouts that you hate. And that's why it's so important that you really start off, like we said, small changes, but over time, this will slowly start to evolve your lifestyle so to become the person that actually takes care of themselves at a deeper level and does all these things so they can live a better life.
And so I just want to touch on this because this could be probably an hour show in and of itself. But, for people who are just getting started, I think that it's not something to overlook. Like, I think it's something that we definitely should touch on. And that is, and you can tell me what you think, but basically all these fad diets that are out right now. And that's my opinion. But I think that a lot of these things are fad diets, keto, paleo, low carb, high fat, whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts on just that as a general aspect?
So keto's come back after quite some time being out of the spotlight. And I'm not going to bash on anything necessarily, because that's not really the stance I want to take. But I do know some people who follow paleo and they feel a lot better doing it because they're making better food decisions. And so by having those type of guidelines around eat this, don't eat that, typically people end up eating less because there's less junk food that's included in that. And so is this working for me? Yes or no? If it's not working for me, then I think that's another alternative we can look at in terms of what can we follow that does work. So I think paleo is one of the least faddish diets that are out right now, because for the most part, it's centered around eating natural, healthy foods that humans should be eating. Whereas keto is a little bit more restrictive in terms of the carb intake. And I don't think that's a really long-term best approach that people should take. I think it can work in the short term, but I really don't think it's going to evolve into a lifestyle change that most people are going to be happy with sticking to. And so if you actually just think about it this way, if you just eat non-processed foods, you shop around the outside of the aisles of the grocery store, That's pretty much all the food decisions you need to be making. Now, can you have pizza every now and then? Sure. Ice cream? Sure. I just had some ice cream cake last weekend. But for the most part, this isn't what's consisting of my diet. What's going to happen is that if you find yourself being super restricted on foods that you shouldn't eat, guess what's going to happen? You're going to eat that and you're going to binge the shit out of it because you finally had something that you couldn't have for so long. And so, are dietary guidelines important? Yes, but what's more important is that you change your relationship with food in and of itself.
And I think so. Something that I heard from another guy who lost a ton of weight as well. He doesn't say that like these are foods that I can have and these are foods that I can't have because he doesn't want to put that negative charge on those foods. What he does is he calls them sometimes foods and all the time foods. So things like, really great carb sources and lean proteins and vegetables and things like that. Those are all the time foods. Like those are foods that I can have all the time, anytime. And then there's things like sometimes food where I'm not going to have it every day, like cakes and cookies and chips and, whatever it is that you put in the camp of your sometimes foods. But he said getting rid of that, really helped him get rid of that negative aspect and that negative relationship towards food. And it really helped him as well. So I thought that was something that was very interesting and really good.
Yeah, the challenge is that once you decide to eat a bad food, you judge yourself as being a bad person. And all of a sudden, everything starts to get screwed up from there. And if you think about it, not at like a health aspect, but in terms of body composition, 15 calories from a soft pretzel versus 15 calories of celery still are going to be relatively the same in terms of the caloric intake. And so pizza doesn't make you fat. Ice cream doesn't make you fat. Too much of these things make you fat. And so as long as you're eating them within moderation to an extent, you can still have them and lose weight. But I think there's such a misconception around what foods are good for you, bad for you, fattening, non-fattening, that just really screws this whole relationship and makes it much more challenging for people than it needs to be.
And like I said, that could be a whole podcast in and of itself down the road. But I definitely wanted to touch on that because I think when people are first getting started, following something like that could either really help them or really hurt them in the very early stages of this weight loss journey.
Right. And think about it this way too, when you start eating better foods, you're going to start feeling better just because the nutrient profile is better, it's less processed, and there's actually the feeling that I'm taking care of myself, I'm making good decisions for myself. And that in of itself starts to feel good. And once you're in that momentum and that habit and the behavior of doing that, you're going to continue to do that. But if you still have these things showing up in your life, like a lot of stress, a lack of sleep, a lot of anxiety, and you don't really address that aspect, you just try to control food. In my experience of working with people, that's a losing battle. You have to get to the root cause of what's really affecting my behavior and my decision making and start there. And then people start to evolve to naturally eating healthier foods because it makes them feel better and eventually it makes them look better too.
And listen, I'll be the first to say that, I used to have cheeseburgers and fries and chicken tender, all the stuff that is just really, really not good for you on so many different levels and for so many different reasons. And once I started cutting those things out and following, something very similar to, the paleo diet where I wanted to get rid of things that came out of a box, essentially. When I have those foods now, I know almost within 5 to 10 minutes of finishing that meal that it was not a good idea because I feel sluggish. I can feel myself trying to digest that food and my body is like, why did you do this to us? When you then have those foods that you haven't had for a long time, it makes it harder to binge on these things because your body is essentially rejecting it and doesn't want those foods anymore.
Right. Most people don't know how good they can feel by making better food decisions. But if you always feel kind of like shit, You don't have the contrast. You don't have the opposite understanding how much better you feel if you start eating better. And so once you understand that, then you can say, okay, if I continue to eat this ice cream cake 3 or 4 times a week, I'm going to feel a lot worse. So sometimes you just have to get to that point and realize and experience the fact how much better you're going to feel and your life is going to be when you start making better decisions around food too.
So, do you think that there's anything else that you would like to add as far as it goes for people who are just getting started, people who, maybe need to take that first step, whether it be, joining the gym or whether it be cleaning out the pantry and getting rid of all that stuff? Like we've said multiple times just on this show today, just making those small changes. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to kind of help people get going?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too is sleep. That's going to be a huge, huge, huge impact on several reasons. If you're not very well rested, you're going to have more stress. You're going to have more cravings for junk food. Your decision-making abilities going to go way down because you're tired. That's going to affect your motivation, your desire to change. And so you get in a really big rut that can be really hard to get out of if you're not sleeping right or you're staying up too late, watching Netflix or whatever that is. That seems to be the thing everyone's bashing nowadays, is staying up watching Netflix. Guilty as charged as well. But just really making sure that you get sleep, because if your battery is running on empty, your capacity to handle life on a day-to-day basis is so diminished. And so it's going to affect your income. It's going to affect your health. It's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect yourself. And it's so important that you have good quality sleep so you can actually live the life that you want to live. And if you think about how much stress and anxiety is affected by sleep, it becomes this cycle of sleep, stress, bad food, binge, repeat that people get stuck in. And so if you can shoot for 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, that's going to have a tremendous influence on everything else that's happening in your life.
And so I think really it comes down to managing the stress surrounding everything that's going on. So if if you're getting a good night's sleep, if your area as far as your office and everything goes, home is organized, it seems like managing your stress levels will help prevent you from swinging off track and overeating and using that eating or drinking for that matter as your escape from the stress. If you can minimize that or at least learn to manage it, it's going to really assist in the weight loss.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge, huge part of it. Because the ways that we live now, we have instant gratification. We've got Facebook, Instagram, emails, notifications. You've got the world at your fingertips on your phone. And the moment you feel a bad emotion or the moment you start to feel some rumination or anxiety or worry, you're going to go to that dopamine fix to escape. And so not only is it reducing the stress, but actually being with your emotions, being with your feelings, and actually acknowledging that. This is a little bit maybe outside the scope of this conversation here, but actually being able to sit with those emotions instead of running away from them so you can understand how to mitigate that, like you said. So instead of just, as soon as you start to feel anxiety, run to your phone, run to the cupboard, run to the TV, run to the internet to stop feeling that, you actually have to manage your emotions in a different way.
And I think that identifying what is causing that stress, like what is the root of the stress, is also going to be a way that we can manage that. So like, let's say, and believe me, I know that I'm guilty of this on all accounts, but shutting off your phone or at least eliminating the work from your phone once you get home. I think that that's a big one. And I went, and I know that most people are not going to be this lucky and have this option, but I went to my boss and I said, hey, I would like a work phone. I would like a separate number. I would like to separate everything from my personal phone. Because when I come home, 9 times out of 10, I actually just leave that work phone in the car. And I don't have those stressors anymore, because what I used to do is I would, my phone would buzz and I would have my phone on me because it's my personal phone as well. And then it would be this email and it would be something like that I shouldn't be reading at home. It's 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And then I get all pissed off and, then I'm trying to go to sleep or do whatever it is that I'm doing. And I have these stressors. So I think making that elimination and kind of drawing that metaphorical line in the sand and saying, okay, you are for work and you're not going to come inside at this point in time. I think that definitely helped with some of the stress. So it's just an option.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that as well. And although I try to shut everything down off by 8, part of it still is like, is there an email I have to answer? Is there something else I have to do? Something else I have to do? So part of us actually becomes addicted to the stress and always thinking if there's something else that we have to do, something else that we should be doing. And so we become obsessed with being busy without necessarily being productive. And so if that becomes a underlying thing, that's actually how we manage stress in our lives, is to continually do things so we don't have this nervous energy. But setting up those boundaries, like you said, and say, 8 o'clock, I'm done answering emails. I'll get a hold of you tomorrow when I wake up, whatever time I decide to open up my phone. But figuring out, what those are for you so you can actually separate that personal life from your work life.
Yeah, if it's a problem for you, like if that's what your stressor is, if that's what's causing you stress, then, address it and make some changes. If it's not causing you stress, then something else could be causing you stress, and let's try and identify that. So I think it's kind of just taking like a bird's eye view and a bigger look at what's going on in your life that could potentially be causing these stressors.
Absolutely. And it's hard to see for yourself when you're in the stress, when you're in the fog and you're in the anxiety and overwhelm. You can't really identify it yourself because you're in that same mindset that created it. And like you said, having that 30,000-foot view of an outside person's perspective to help you identify it can be really useful in actually dealing with the thing, because what we think is a diet problem isn't a diet problem. So the thing is never the thing. It's just layered several times underneath what you actually think is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that we have done a great job here providing, not to toot our own horns, I guess, but, we've definitely provided some value for people to just take that first step to launch and get started. I want to thank you so much for reaching out and commenting on my post that I had put out there about doing a coach's corner. And I really look forward to potentially doing some more of these things. I'm sure we could, like I said, dive into, diets and the specifics on some of those things, and kind of really get down a little bit more on this whole weight loss thing. But for today, I just want to say thank you very much for getting connected with me and for coming on.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, this is stuff I could talk about days on because there's so many different aspects and dimensions of it. But like you said, I think this is a really good starting point. And the most important thing is that people actually get started, because as soon as you take that step and you create some action, you start creating momentum. So although you may not have the perfect plan or the perfect life or the perfect thing to actually have this right opportunity, if you just start doing something anywhere at any time, that's often enough just to get that first step moving.
Yeah. Absolutely. I really can't agree more with you on that one. I think just taking that first step and getting going is the most important action to take. And then you can always pivot and U-turn and make adjustments as you go. But you can't make those adjustments and figure things out if you haven't taken that first step yet.
Absolutely. Ian.
So, all right, Galen, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to, getting up with you again on some of these topics.
Great to be on. Talk to you soon.
All right, my friends, that is our first edition of Coach's Corner here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. I would love to know what you thought of this first episode. I will be releasing a few of these. It will be just once per month for right now. So for, November, December, January, we'll probably have a few different coaches on and we'll cover a few different topics. And I would love to hear your thoughts and to let me know what you think of these episodes, if you like these episodes, and if you find them to be valuable, useful, and applicable to you, or at least someone that you know. And this will just really help me figure out if this is something that we're going to continue, if this is something that you, the listeners, like, or if this is something that, we're going to drop because it's not valuable and the listeners are not enjoying it. So if you could just please let me know what you thought of this, I would greatly appreciate that. And I will see you on Monday with our normal interview on the Do It For Yourself podcast.